Right. Is it cold there these days?
Yeah, really cold.
Oh, right. Yeah, on the other side, Australia, Melbourne, they say it's 42 today the temperature there.
Yeah, yeah. I saw that in the news.
Yeah. Yeah, we are okay. We are with 20s, we are okay.
Yeah,
Right, okay. So, I sent you the link for the recording of yesterday's lesson also today.
yeah. I saw the link. I didn't
Okay, right, yeah. No
click it.
problem. I mean, it's there in the YouTube at any time. You can just click it and see that one. Uh, so today I want to move into, we were yesterday, we were talking about what we call traditional costing. And
Yeah,
there, basically, it was all about this overheads, apportionment of overheads. And we said that we have three bases mostly. One, if you are producing one particular item, you can go by the unit number of units or labor hours or machine hours. There are slight variants of that one, the labor cost, material cost, different percentages, but overall, these are the three main ways of doing it. But this was always, it was good in the earlier environment where the overheads are very little compared to the total cost. But today, as I said, we live in a area of, with lot of technology where we use more overheads than earlier. So if you really took the proportion of cost, overheads are fairly on the up nowadays compared to the direct material cost, compared to the direct labor cost. Therefore, a right way of allocating or more accurate way of allocating the overheads has become more critical than in the earlier days because a big percentage is now overhead because we are using more machinery and more computerized environment. And also we use small batch sizes. The machine hours, labor hours, all that is good. We are using large one cycle, one running. But here we may be running the machine for 2 hours for one product, stop the machine, reset it, do another product for 1 hour, stop the machine, reset it, and do it for another 3 hours for another product. And we are on small batch sizes. And also we use little direct labor. And therefore, the impact of all that is we have more indirect overheads because we are using more computers, more insurance, more depreciation, that kind of thing, and less direct cost. So the traditional method of costing, the earlier two methods we were discussing the marginal, where we were looking absorption of the, sorry, where we were looking at the total cost, absorption cost. The total cost is absorbed into the production, into the inventory. Then we were looking at marginal cost where we don't absorb the overheads, but only the direct material and the direct labor. And the traditional method used basically standard costing because they were meant for large standard scale production. But today, none of those things are really working, and therefore, our earlier methods are becoming somewhat outdated because the largest cost of production has turned to be indirect overhead. So, uh, in the traditional costing, all these things are grouped up as one particular overhead cost, indirect overheads, electricity, water, labor, all that kind of a thing, supervisor salary, and that is not good enough. And the management they don't know what is the components of the largest production cost or the indirect cost, and they are allocated on some kind of an arbitrary basis, labor hours or something like that. So all that is not really helpful for many of us. And because the costs are inappropriately or inaccurately shared, the total production cost can be wrong, and which will lead to poor pricing decisions and could be you will be edged out of your competition. Will you give me a second, Asanga?
okay.
Hello, 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 hello. Kata karanne? Kaude? Where is the number? Right. So because of all that, what happened was there was a need for more detailed overhead study, overhead allocation, and for that, with that one, we have come to a new kind of costing, which was introduced somewhere in 1990s, but is called activity-based costing. So basically, the producers have changed the way they produce, small batch sizes, less direct labor. So all those things have basically uh, given us a kind of a different scenario, and the production environment has changed. So small batch sizes, less direct labor, and therefore more indirect overhead, less direct costs. So the traditional costs are not really becoming relevant, and bulk of the cost is indirect, and therefore the management need to know in detail the indirect cost, why it is incurred, and therefore there can be wrong allocations, and therefore there was a necessity for new term of costing, and that is what we call activity based costing. So this is an alternate way to do the product costing. So
Yeah.
basically your direct material, direct labor, the whatever direct expenses, no change whatsoever in either method. But it is the way of allocating overheads, it is the way of absorbing overheads that is going to be different. Now, if you remember in the traditional costing, we what we did was we allocated the overheads to various functions: finance, human resources, various production, canteen, uh, machine, whatever it was allocated. But in the activity based costing, what we do is we have something called a cost pool. The theory is the overheads are driven, or the overheads are incurred for activities, not for functions. So it is, in fact, it is going into little bit more detail. If you look at the finance function, there is a particular area where they write the checks. Now that's an activity. Particular area where they raise the vouchers. Particular area where they order the inventory. So you look at all the activities, because the theory is it is not the flow space, or it is not anything that is going to drive the weight, it is the activity. So you try to split all your operations into little activities, because activity only consumes the resources. So we try to identify the activities. For example, you may have a customer relationship unit. So that's an activity, right? Now that activity will have lot of expenses. The customer relationship people who are working there, their salaries, their telephone bills, their office space, all that is what we call a cost pool, which is a kind of an activity. And everything that is related to that cost pool is charged and identified to that activity. So it's a totally a deviation from our traditional costing, where we go by various functions. Instead of functions, we look at the activity. And then we have something called the cost driver. What is a cost driver? Basically, in the earlier theory, we were thinking all the costs are driven, the overhead costs are driven by the labor hours or by the machine hours. So the belief was more machine hours you run, more overhead. The belief was more labor you use, more overhead. But you and I know it is wrong, but that was the assumption that was there. But in the cost driver basis, the what is basically thinking is, okay, there's a cost pool. For example, the customer relationship handling. What drives the cost? What will increase the cost? Right? So it is basically what is driving the cost is the number of customer handling. For example, hmm, if you're handling 10 customers, you will have a certain cost. If you're handling 20 customers, you will have a certain cost. If you're having 30 customers, so what is driving is the number of customer handling. Or maybe in a customer complaint unit, number of complaints that you handle. So if you are looking at an inventory kind of activity where you are receiving goods, it is the number of the dispatch number of receipts or number of GRNs raised. If you are dispatching the activity, the number of dispatches that you have sent off. In a hospital, in a hospital operating theater, it is the number of operations or the procedures that they do. That is what is going to drive the cost of the operating theater. So the operating theater will have the doctor's cost, this, that, and the other. All that is driven by the number of operations. The electricity is driven by number of operations. It is not driven by the number of laborers or the number of machines, but it is driven by the number of operations or the procedures or the surgeries they do. So that is what, so you can see it's an extension of your traditional costing, but going into more details, first classifying all the cost into a cost pool and then trying to identify what is that cost driver which is going to uh, uh, drive that cost. So this is basically what is the new activity-based costing. So before we talk about activity-based costing, we must find out what were the problems with our absorption costing. So as I said, the absorption costing was very valid, and even today it is valid because accounting standards dictates we value the inventory based on absorption costing. So basically it was very good so long as it was labor intensive or so long as it was machine intensive. But today bulk of the expenditure is indirect, and therefore you need a much more detailed analysis of your indirect expenditure or overhead activity. And therefore the traditional system is becoming somewhat outdated, and we need a kind of a thing. So the criticism was that you cannot calculate a true cost uh, when there is absorption costing and when there is too much of overheads in, because overheads are charged to departments in some arbitrary way, and the overheads are related to direct labor hours or machine hours, which is not no longer realistic. Marginal costing, the problem was basically we were not charging the overheads at all to the product, so the product cost was somewhat understated, and also the variable cost may be very little compared to the big overhead cost, and therefore the total the overhead costs are ignored, and there can be kind of distortion of costing. So basically, for to overcome this one, we have the activity based costing, where we try to identify a cost pool and a cost drive. So now first of all, we have to identify the first thing in the activity based costing. We must identify the activity. So if you really look at a business, there are thousands of activities, but we can't go to that level. We have to identify the main activities, what is going to consume the main overhead. Right? So we must try to look at the big activity, because you can't be costing for about 100, 200 activities. You must try and limit it to about 6 or 7 or 8 activities and see what are the main activity that is going to consume overhead resources. Of course, it will differ from one business to other. In a hospital, it will be a different one. In a school, it will be a different one. In a vegetable supermarket, it will be another one. So we have to identify the activity. So basically, there are 4 ways to identify the suitable activity. Number one is what we call logistical transaction. So the good short question that you can have it, logistical transaction. So it's basically concerned with the movement of materials or people. So the number of inward receipts, number of outward dispatches, the logistics, and maybe if you are transporting people, the number of people that you transport to and from office or the factory. So it's all to do with the movement of materials or movement of people, and that is what one way of identifying activities. That is what we call logistical transaction. Then the next one is basically what we call balancing transactions, right? So this is basically trying to find out what are the resources requirement for an operation. So it may be, for example, the people will have to buy raw material. So that's an activity. the procurement of raw materials. So that so we try to look at the balance in transactions. So to find out what are the resources that is required, that is what we call balance in transactions. Then the third one, quality related. Remember, we were talking about the quality yesterday. So the to meet the quality, and the customer expectations, whatever that we need to do, those are what we call quality related activity. Quality control expenses, customer feedback, all related to the quality. So that's what we call quality transaction. Then we have the finally what we call the chain transaction. So basically, whatever the activity that we have to do in trying to respond to a customer demand, or maybe trying to respond to a change in specification demand, or maybe trying to respond to some kind of a delivery method. So these are the four kinds of levels of activity or four kinds of activity we can use. So once we do the questions, we will come across some of these activities. So having identified the activity, next thing is we have to identify what is the cost driver. So what is the cost driver? For each activity, we must try and select a particular cost driver. That cost driver is the thing that is going to increase the cost of activity or reduce the cost of activity. In other words, that is what is going to drive the activity. So, for example, in a customer relationship, as I said, the number of complaints. In a order dispatch, the number of orders. In a transport, the number of people that you carry. Those are the things what is going to drive the cost, and this is what we call cost driver. So the cost driver, first thing, it must be something relevant. Not very easy. We have to find out what is the most relevant cost driver. So there can be, it has to be some kind of a direct connection between the consumption of resources and the activity. And also something that should be easily measurable. Should not be very, very complicated because the activity based costing itself is very, very but very, very complicated. We should not make it more complicated by putting up very difficult one. So it must be very straightforward activities we should be looking at the driver. So generally, cost of setting up machinery for a production run by the number of setups. Every time when you change the machine, you have to incur cost. That's an activity. So the number of setups is going to increase the cost. Every time when you set up the operating theater for an operation, the cost will go up. The cost is driven by number of setups. Sometimes it is a run in the number of machine hours. The machines are run and the overheads will increase by the number of machine hours. So you can see the old machine hours are still used, but not for every cost, but for the only for the machine running time. Labor hours are still used, but not for the entire operation, not to allocate the rent, but for the assembly, because assembly is something done by the laborer. Cost of ordering, number of order received, that's an activity and that's a cost driver. Then number of dispatches, the cost of dispatches, the number of dispatches is the cost driver. Quality, the number of inspections could be the cost driver. Purchasing, number of purchase orders could be the cost driver. So you can have many, many cost drivers. Uh, Sometimes it's tough because sometimes you might find that the cost drivers are almost, there are many cost drivers. You can't have many. You must select the most appropriate. So what is relevant and what is directly can be connected to the consumption of overhead. So the cost driver types also we have three types. One called the transaction driver. So here basically the cost of the activity is affected by number of particular action. So like the number of setup, number of batches of materials received. So that's mostly our cost driver will be somewhat transaction type. But we have something what we call duration type. It's a time, it's a time. So maybe as for a kidney operation, they might take 4 hours. For heart operation, they might take 3 hours. For a appendicitis operation, they might take only half an hour. So you go by the time, and that is your cost driver. Because the cost is driven by the time. So that's what we call a duration driver. Then we have something called intensity drivers. It may be the same kind of a thing, but you have to put more effort to, maybe, for example, to do an overseas order. Local order on a telephone call, you can do it. But same thing overseas, you need to spend more time, more effort, and that is what we call intensity driver. So the effort that goes in may be much more in overseas than in a local setup. So these are the three types of cost drivers. So we have four cost type of activities, three cost drivers, which is going to which are the key things in the activity based cost. So basically, the ABC approaches through 5 steps. First of all of production overheads are grouped into activities. So it's not a question of putting it to the finance function, HR function. We look at a couple of activities and we try to identify every expenditure into one of those activities, right? And then identify cost driver for each activity. So that's a difficult one, but that is what we should be doing. We should be looking at, you know, doing something uh, for the each activity. Then you have to calculate a cost driver for each activity. So each activity may be costing 100,000, but you are putting up 10,000 orders. So per each order, the cost is 10. So maybe for example, customer complaints, that 100,000 is the first total cost for the customer complaint unit, and there are 10,000 complaints. So for each customer complaint, it is $10. So if a customer has complained you 5 times, that customer should cost you $50. So this is something which we are going to come up later on, something called customer profitability analysis. So if a customer is a real troublesome character customer who is giving you lot of complaints, that customer is costing you, uh, you know, $50 or whatever it may be. One customer may not be making any complaints, so he's a good customer. You don't need to incur. Some fellow must be a real nasty fellow, putting up all the complaints, and your time is taken by that fellow. Uh, uh, that can be a very costly, right? So surely these are the kind of thing that you should be uh, do all the time with the costing part of it. So the next one is to absorb that activity cost into the product. So as I said, the product has 5 complaints. Then as far as the product is concerned, 10 into 5 should be added into the product. And then you calculate the full production cost. So you can see what we are really doing here is basically we are looking only at the overhead part of it. Direct material, direct labor, whether it is traditional costing or ABC costing, it does not matter, it is the same. It is the overhead costing, it is the overhead part which will change from the traditional costing to the activity based costing. You can see it's still a question of allocation, still a question of absorption, but the absorption is now more on a more scientific basis, more based on cost driver rather than taking just on machine hours or labor. So when is the ABC relevant? Now that's another one. Now obviously you will realize ABC is a very expensive system to operate because you have to go into lot of details into your activity. The earlier system was very easy. Take the total cost divided by the number of labor hours, take the cost. But here you have to have a system where it will gather, collect information on a very detailed basis. And This should be, because it is expensive, we must use it only where it is appropriate. So where it is appropriate is a good short question. You might have it. It is very appropriate where the indirect costs are comparatively high relative to direct. So don't try to introduce ABC in a smaller factory or small office where your direct costs are more and little is overhead, because that can be very costly. So I remember I was working in a small firm at one time after my retirement. I was helping a particular lady. She was doing recruitment, and there were only 10 people in that office. So one day she has gone for this seminar on activity-based costing. So she came running, and then she told me, Kuma, shall we introduce activity-based costing? I asked, what? She said, yes, I learned activity-based costing. Super, we will. I said, here we have only 10 people, right? More bulk of our cost is direct expenses. We know there is very little overhead. So why should I go for ABC?
Yeah.
So, so it's a very complicated, very sophisticated one. So you should not introduce it just for the sake of introducing. It should be introduced where the products are very complex, where services are very complex. It's not very simple thing. So much of things happening. Lot of detailed things are happening. Lot of activities are happening to make the product. That's the area where you can use the activity-based cost. And where it is a custom made, where you are making some orders very specific to the customer, probably you want to use activity based costing, because sometimes the order for me will take 10 hours, the order for you will take 20 hours. So you might want to charge the overheads in a different way. Maybe the your the context or the communication with for my order maybe 100 communications, but for your order it may be 20 communications. So per communication $2. For my order you must put $100. For your order they will put only $20 because you communicated only 10 times. And when the products are sold in large numbers, but some in small numbers. So you have a mix of sales happening, large quantities, small quantities happening. In that case, ABC becomes very relevant. So what are the advantages of ABC? Surely you have an answer, it's more accurate. And you have a very good understanding of your cost. You are not bundle all the cost together. You know for each activity the cost. So from there you can do something what we call a cost control, because there are certain activities where you are not going to add any value to the product. You might want to even to remove some of those. If you can really well handle your customers, where you don't have a customer complaint coming in, you can shut down the customer complaint unit when you're confident that you don't have any more customer complaints. You can shut down it. So you can save the cost. But for you to do that one, you must know there's an activity called customer complaint. And that is not bringing any more complaints. So let's close that one. So you can have a better understanding of cost and better control of, and you have a fair allocation of cost. It is based on the cost driver. It is not based on something very arbitrary like machine hours or labor hours or something. It can be used in complex situation, and it must be used in complex situation. So today actually we are very fortunate. We don't need to do all these things in real practice because we have lot of software support. We just have to input and the things will come out from the computer. I remember at the very beginning of ABC costing, I tried to do ABC costing for some of our projects in a particular company, and it was very tough. I had to put 100 Excel worksheets, work it through this one, that one, link it, not easy. But today we have software, we can use it. And remember the last one, it can be applied for services too, because in the service area, uh, because either we produce goods or we produce services. In the service area, there's a huge amount of overhead, and activity-based costing can be used for services, because lot of time I see this question coming up saying activity-based cannot be used true or false. Activity-based can be used for service. because we can identify all the activities that goes for services and allocate the expenditure. For example, the tuition what I'm giving, there are a couple of activities here. The computer is working, so I can find out the total cost for the computer, and I can find out the what is driving the cost. Okay, the number of hours or number of minutes. So per minute the computer cost, I can charge it to my tuition
Yeah.
like that. So we can the doctor services. It's a number of minutes that they spend with the patient, right? It can be. And also sometimes it can be the intensity. You go to a heart specialist, he will charge a different fee from you go to a general physician because the intensity of the heart thing is much more bigger. Kidney is much more bigger. But you go for a general cough or something, they will not charge too much because the cost is not too much. So the intensity also can be taken up. So that is what the advantage. So, but having said with all the good advantages, we have lot of disadvantages. Not always relevant. What do you mean by not always relevant? That is, it unless your costs are very high, overhead costs, this is not a very good thing. Still, we have some arbitrary cost allocation. We are allocating according to the number of hours. We are allocating according to the number of dispatchers. We are allocating according to the number of kilometers run. So still there is some kind of a arbitrary allocation. So it's not a perfect 100% right situation. Most difficult thing is to select the appropriate drivers and appropriate activities. When you have too many activities, you can't be going for too many activities. You have to go for uh, the best activities, the activity that consumes the expenditure more, and try to work it out. And it is very complex, difficult to explain to the people. I found it extremely difficult to explain to the board of directors, the activity-based costing, the cost drivers and all that. It's not surprise because even we as SIMA students, it's not a very easy thing like the traditional costing and very expensive to operate. So we have a theory all the time, cost versus benefit. So we must see if we introduce the activity-based costing, will we have any benefits? So like that lady who came and told, Yukuma put activity-based costing, it is crazy. It's too much to spend and too little to gain. So basically, you must not try to work on that kind of a thing. So implications of switching to ABC. So most of the people will want to switch from traditional to ABC because they believe ABC is more accurate. ABC gives a better cost understanding. ABC makes a fair allocation of resources. ABC will facilitate better cost control. ABC can be used in complex situations. ABC can be applied beyond production, even to the service industry. ABC can be used in almost every area. So the implications of switching to ABC. Why should we switch to ABC and what are the things that is going to do it? So basically the number one thing, your pricing will be now much more based on more realistic costing. So pricing will be based on more realistic costing. It's not based on some arbitrary allocation. So pricing decisions will improve. When the pricing decisions improve, what happens? Your you will become more competitive because you're based on more accurate cost data. Mm. Sales strategy can become very sound because now you have a more realistic product cost and that will motivate the sales staff to sell the product at a reasonable rate rather than arbitrary rate. So target customers who are rather who thought this is unprofitable will now be accommodative because your costing has given better figures and you can do it. And you may want to stop targeting customers. Some customers may be real child and you're spending too much of money on their customer complaints and your activity based costing will show that fellow is not worth uh, moving around. better stop. So you can make good decisions. Decision making can be improved. The R&D, the production and sales of effort will be for those products which has a higher sales margin. Okay, now we have got our the right cost. We know what our sales, so we know our sales margin, so we can focus on high sales margin areas because we know the cost. And particularly, performance measures can be improved. The performance measured is basically how you measure the performance of your manager. Now, when the costing is very accurate, your the figures that you give will be much more accurate, and the people will accept it, and that can be will improve the performance measurement. So these are the few things that you should be looking all the time to do it. So basically with that, we come to the end of another big area on what we call the activity-based costing. Right? So now what I want to do is before I move into next areas, we have done two areas, two fairly big areas. You can now, do you have the BPP study book?
I have Kaplan.
Kaplan. So Kaplan is good. So I'm doing the Kaplan. So I basically have completed the Kaplan chapter 1 and 2 now.
Yeah,
So what I want is we will be, before we move into the next area, I want to look at some questions on the areas what we have done.
yeah,
So that, it will be much more meaningful for you to understand what we have done. Right? So let's look at some of the questions. I put up, so I'll send you these questions, but I want to discuss it. This is not to, test our knowledge, but this is to get more knowledge on what we have learned.
yeah.
So can you see the screen now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So I put up some questions. I put up these questions from the BPP. So you can look at the Kaplan questions also later on. And if we have any difficulty, you can tell me so that we can look at that one. So let's look at this one. So here we have a company that is publishing 3 newspapers, right? So the Post, the Gazette, and the News. So this is where the costing will become more relevant because we want to find out the cost per each of the papers. And following information have been obtained for the accounting system for the period 6. So it may be the 6 months or whatever, it doesn't matter. So number published. Post, they are publishing 60,000. Gazette, they are publishing 80,000. The news, they are publishing 90,000. Direct labor hours per unit. So to print the post paper, they take zero point 0.2 hours. The other one, they take zero point 0.3 hours. And other one is zero point 0.5 and zero point 0.3. So you can see the Gazette seems to be taking more labor hours. Gazette seem to be taking. And the machine hours, if you really look at, it is again the Gazette seems to be taking more machine hours. And every time when they want to do the paper, they have setups. Setups means they have to do the post 60,000 papers, they have to do 4 setups. So in other words, for each machine setup, they can run 15,000 papers. Gazette, to do 80,000, they need 3 setups. News, to do 90,000, they need 3 setups. Then they have distribution outlets 15, 18, and 12. Now you can see the overhead. So in this question, the overheads are given in line with what we learned just now for each of the activity. Distribution, machinery maintenance, machine setup, and the total is given. Now, under traditional overhead, actually you don't need the detailed breakdown. You only need the total. You need only the total. So the total what they are given is 72,800. 72,800 is the total overhead that is incurred.
Yeah,
So 72,800. So that is what you need when you are doing absorption costing or traditional costing. If you are doing activity based, you will need to go into the details. So there are 3 activities you have to find out distribution, what is the cost driver, machinery maintenance, what is the cost driver, machine setup cost driver. But here you don't need all that. Here you need, so because they ask in traditional overhead absorption rate. So now we have to find out the what is the thing. So you remember for traditional overhead we can do three things. One, the number of units, other one the machine hours, or other one the labor hours. So we have to decide. The examiner has not told us anything. Examiner has not told us, we know surely we can go by the number of units because they are producing three types of paper. So we can't add the 60, 80 and 90, no, because there are three types of papers. That is not right. So either it has to be machine hours or either it has to be labor hours. What do you think is the more appropriate one? What do you think is more appropriate one? How can we know what is more appropriate between the machine and labor hours?
Uh, Labor hours.
Labor hours. I think it is more relevant to the machine hours because if you really look at, you can see they are more machine intensive, Asanga. Direct labor 2 hours, 0.2, 0.4, 0.3, 0.5, 0.1, 0.3. More related to the machine hours, isn't it?
Yes.
So because of that, I will use the machine hours. So now we have to find out, okay, what is the total machine hours for the period 6? So they are producing the post. They are producing 60,000 posts and each is going to take 0.4 hours, right? So 60,000 into 0.4 is the machine hours that is going to take to produce the post only. So 60 into 0.4 is the machine hours that is going to take, that is going to be 24,000. Similarly, if you take the gazette, it is going to be 80,000 and each is going to take zero point 0.5, that means 40,000. And similarly, if you take the news, it is 90 into zero point 0.3, which is going to be 27,000. So the total machine hours that is run during this period 6 is 91,000. 24 plus 40 plus 27, 91,000. Correct?
Yeah.
So to run a 91,000 machine hours, we are spending 72,800. So now we can find the overhead absorption rate. Total overhead 72,800. 91,000 is the machine hours. So we can find out when you divide that 172,800 by 91,000, we will find the machine overhead absorption rate. That's what we need to get. 72,800 divided by 91, which is going to be 80 cents. 80 cents is the machine hour. So, so that actually that is what this question is asking. So you don't need to go beyond that one. But let's assume that they have ask about for the post the number of machine hours that will be required to the cost from the cost, right? So 80 cents dollars is the cost. So for the post, they are going to use 4.4 machine hours. So the machine hour cost is 0.80 cents per hour. Per hour. So we have to find out per machine, for per unit, it's 0.4 hours. So 0.80 is for 1 hour. So we can divide it 0.80 by 1 hour and multiply by 0.4, which will give you the cost per post. So the cost per post is 0.32 cents. Here it will be 0.40 cents. Here it will be 0.24 cents. Correct? So this is what, so we are not being given the other information. If they are given the other information, we can even calculate the total cost. if they are told the number of published and all that. So you can see in this question, what I want you to understand is there is a lot of information which are not relevant. We did not, because there were no need for us to take the direct labor hours. There were no need to take the setup. There were no need of distribution outlets. Neither we needed all these information. So this is your cleverness. Just because the examiner has given all the information, don't assume that you need to use all that information. You must be able to select, spot, and use the right information. That's also another skill that we have to learn with this objective test question. Earlier in our earlier paper, generally the information that was given was always thought to be used. But today in this objective test question paper, we have a lot of information which is not worth even reading. But we do not know whether it is worth reading or not till we really understand the question.
Yeah.
So this is what this is the skill that we have been learning in the days to come.
Yeah.
Right. So that is question number one. So now I look at so this is a very simple theory question. So you get some calculation questions, you get some theory questions. So the theory question is all about overhead will be always over absorbed in which of these circumstances. So basically we want to know, you remember that we go by predetermined. Hmm? We go by predetermined, and so we have already decided. So this kind of a question also good for us if we can't, think about it, put up a kind of figures. Okay, predetermined 100,000 is overhead, 10,000 is the output or whatever, and then we say $10. So how it can get over absorbed? So over absorption can happen if your actual cost is only 90,000. If your actual cost is only 90,000, if you produce 10,000, you will be absorbing at the rate of 10,100,000. So when the actual cost is 90, you have over absorbed 10. That is one. The other one, what we can happen is actual cost is 100,000, but you have produced more than 10,000. You have produced 11,000, for example. So when you produce 11,000 at the rate of 10, you will be absorbing 110,000, whereas the actual cost is 100. So you can have an over-absorption situation arising due to two things. One, when the actual overheads are less than the budget. Two, when the output is more than the budget. In both these situations here, actual overheads are less. 100,000, but it was 90. Here, it's 100,000, but we have produced not 10,000, we have produced more. In both these situations, over absorption will occur.
Sorry, can you explain me the second one? I'm a bit
Yeah,
confused.
okay. Yeah, the overhead absorption rate is because we decided the budget is 100 and we
Yeah.
decided the output is 10, predetermined. So we are going to absorb at the rate of 10. But our actual output is 11,000.
Yeah.
So then in that case, we are going to absorb 110,000 into the product.
Yeah.
Right? 11,000 into 10. But our actual overheads are only 100,000. So we have over absorption of 10,000. Right? Because we have spent only 100, but to our products, because we produce more, we are absorbing 110,000, much more than we incurred. Why that is happening? Because we are going by predetermined. So you can just note down over absorption occurs. Over absorption occurs when your actual expenditure is less than the budget,
Yeah.
or when your actual output is more than the budget.
Okay. Two different scenarios.
Two different scenarios because it is based on two scenarios. One is the cost, other one is the output. So similarly, you can look at the under absorption, the opposite of this one. Under absorption occurs when your actual overheads are more than the budget, or your actual production is less than the budget. So that's opposite of the earlier thing. So these things you have to keep it in your head very clear, because in short questions you don't have time to think too much about it. You should be able to take it out from your head straight away and put it into the computer. So just try to master these things. So the best thing is to look at some figures and try to work it through. Once you work it through, it will be there in your memory forever. It's easy for you to work it, understand. So look at like this, some figures, put up some figures, fight it out with yourself. Now I want to look at this question. So they are talking about over absorption situation. So actual output is higher than the budgeted output. Actual output is higher than the budgeted output. It can end up with a overabsorption. You remember we just now said when the actual output is higher than the budgeted output, it can end up with a overabsorption. Actual overheads incurred are higher than the amount absorbed. Actual overhead incurred are higher than the amount over. So overhead incurred is 100,000, right? Overhead incurred are 100,000, but the amount absorbed is 90,000. So that is a under absorption situation. Actual overheads incurred are higher. Actual overhead incurred are 100,000. Amount absorbed is 90,000. So that is a under absorption situation, because you have absorbed only 90, but you have incurred. Look at the third one. Actual overheads incurred are lower than the amount absorbed. Actual incurred are 90, absorbed is 100,000. Now this is surely over absorption. Correct?
Yeah.
This is surely over. So this is definitely right. But this is also may be right. I'll come to that in a minute. Budgeted overheads are lower than the overheads absorbed. So budgeted overheads are 100. Overhead absorbs are 90. So that means it is an under absorption situation. So definitely this is wrong. This is wrong. This can be right. But they're asking will always be. Always be. So that is also another word that you have to learn. Always be. Because although I said overheads will be always overabsorbed in which the actual output higher than the budgeted output. So actual output is, so let's assume that the budget is 100 expenditure, budgeted output is 10,000. So we have put 10, and 10 is the absorption rate. So here actual overheads incurred are higher. The first one, actual overput output is higher than the budgeted output. Okay. So the budgeted output is, let's assume 10,000, but the actual output is 12,000. But let's assume that your expenditure also has gone up. Expenditure is actually 130,000. So you will absorb it at the rate of 10, because that is the standard overhead absorption rate. 12,000 actual units, you will absorb 120,000. But you can see still 10,000 is underabsorbed. Now there what happened? Both the things vary. Now all this time I was thinking of one situation changing. But here now we can see both the things are changing. So when both the things are changing, it can have a situation. So you have to be very, very careful in the answers. You know, so this is definitely the C1 is definitely always situation. Actual overhead incurred are 90,000, lower than the amount absorbed. So 90, amount absorbed is 100. This is surely overabsorption. So the C is the right answer.
And fourth one,
Mm-hmm.
uh, budgeted is
Over
on.
here, budgeted is 100. Budget. Let's assume budget is 100 is
Yeah,
lower than the overhead absorbed. So
and it's
100,000 is the
at the cost.
100 is thousand in the budget. Sorry, 100 is the budget. 110,000 is the amount absorbed.
Yeah,
Right. So there you can see what has happened. Budget is the 100,000. Amount absorbed is 110,000. Now that is also a over absorption situation. But that also can happen due to different variations. So this is the only answer where it will happen always. Always this happen in the C scenario. Correct?
yeah,
So that is what you have to. So these questions you can see how tricky they can be. Uh, you have to put up the figures in this type of a question, even though it looks very simple. Put up some figures and try to think about it before you go and mark your answer.
yeah.
Right. So let's look at the third one. Which of the following statements about predetermined overhead absorption rates are true? So we said that generally the overhead absorption rates are predetermined. So number one, they say using a predetermined absorption rates avoids fluctuation in unit cost caused by abnormally high or low overhead expenditure or activity levels. And that is what I said, that we don't change it every month. We go by a predetermined rate for some period because we don't want to do the costing changes every month. So this is right. Because of the predetermined rate, we are not going to we are going to avoid fluctuation in the unit. Otherwise, every month, if you are going to change, every month your cost is going to change. 1 month cost will go up. Second month the cost will come down. That is not good for business. So that is number one is right. Then using a predetermined absorption rate offers the administrative convenience of being able to record the full production cost sooner. That is also right. Because otherwise you have to wait till the end of the period to find out the actual cost, and that will be too late, and that will make administration very difficult. So this is also right. Because we are using predetermined, you can record the full cost sooner. You remember we discussed why we do costing? To record the cost, to value the inventory, to do the pricing. So by predetermined, we can do it today rather than doing it at the end of the month. So 2 is also right. What about the third one? Using a predetermined rate avoids the problem of under or over absorption because a constant overhead rate is available. No, because we are using predetermined, we always have under or over absorption. If you are using the actual, we don't have under or over. If you know the actual cost is 120, if you know the actual production is 15,000, we can just put 8 because that is actual. So no under absorption, no over absorption. But when we don't know, when we go by 110,000, and then when they produce 15,000 units, we have a problem because we are going to absorb 150,000. 10 into 15, we are going to absorb 150,000. But actual overheads are 120. So there's a 30,000 under absorption. So this is how you calculate the under absorption. So under absorption happens or over absorption happens because we are using predetermined. So this is wrong. You can't avoid. In fact, it arises purely because of the predetermined. Is it?
Yeah.
So that is what the answer should be for the question number 3. Right. So let's go to the question number 4 and try to find out what is they are going to talk about here. The company has over absorbed. Now you can see this question is coming up all the time. A company has overabsorbed fixed production overhead for the period by 6,000. Fixed overhead absorption rate was 8 per unit. So now they are going by over what is the overhead absorption basis? The number of units. So every time they produce a unit, they absorb 8 and it's based on the normal level of activity of 5,000 units. Actual production was 4,500 units. So now we are given lot of information. We must carefully work it out. So the first thing what you must do is what they are asking is actual fixed overhead for the period. So we can work out when they produce actual 4,500 units, what we absorb, you have to remember always, total overhead absorbed is always overhead absorption rate into actual number, right? Into actual number. So the overhead absorption rate here is 8 per unit into 4,500, the actual number. So we have absorbed 36,000. That is what we have absorbed. And they say when we absorb 36,000, we have absorbed 6,000 in excess. So this is what actually absorbed. And they say when they absorb the 36,000, we have actually over absorbed 6,000. So what is the actual overhead? So can you just pause for a minute and think? We have absorbed into our production 36,000. But doing that, they say we have over absorbed 6,000. So what will be your actual overhead?
42,000.
Yes, nothing. 42 or 30. That's the question. Mhm. Mhm. That's the question. In achieving 36, we have over absorbed 6,000.
Yeah, in here the actual is 36,000.
No, not actual 36. We have absorbed 36 into our production because we produce 4,500 units. Okay. At the rate of 8, we have absorbed into our production 36,000. So into our production cost ledger, we would have debited 36,000. But when we debit 36,000, what they say is it is more by 6,000. In other words, is it clear now?
Yeah, so 30,000.
30,000. 30,000. Now you have to look at from that angle. When they absorb 36, that means they have over absorbed. Absorbed more 6,000. So that means your actual overhead should have been 30. Because over absorption occurs when the actual or when the what is absorbed is more than actual. Under absorption occurs the other way about. If you have absorbed 36 and still if you are under absorbed by 6,000, that means your actual expenditure must be 42. So don't try to memorize formulas. Try to think. Try to think and do it, because if you try to memorize, you can memorize it, but that's not good, because when you get a complicated situation, you may not be able to work it through the memory. Right? Rather than thinking adding and deducting all that, just think about it. Okay, 36,000 absorbed, but in 36,000 absorption, 6,000 more absorbed. So that means my overhead would have been 30. Try to logically argue with yourself rather than trying to 36 minus 6, 36 plus 6, that kind of a situation. Right. So that's the way that you should be looking that kind of answer. Okay. So what I would suggest is, after we finish up this one, take your time, go through these questions again by yourself and try to answer the same questions. Then only you will, you might come across, things working well, something not happening, all that kind of a thing, and you will uh, do it. Right. Okay. So that's basically the thing what we need to look at. So then the fifth one, let's look at the fifth one also. Which of the following is not used as the basis to absorb production overhead in a traditional absorption costing system? That should be easy for you. Question number 5. Which is the way that we don't use to absorb production cost in a traditional system? So remember we discussed there are three methods we absorb it.
Yeah, we are definitely using machine hours
Yeah,
and lab hours,
yeah.
and between A and D.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Production units also we use it. You remember that earlier question, we used the production units.
Yeah,
Right? Production units can be used because if you are producing a single type product, this is the best method to use. If you are using three types of newspapers, you can't do it. But if you are producing only one post, you can use the thing. This will be the number of setups will be something a cost driver for ABC costing,
yeah,
because the number of setups will be an activity that is going to change your cost driver. That is good for ABC costing, but not for this costing. So the three types for this costing is number of production units, number of machine hours, number of labor. Okay.
yeah.
Right. So that is number 5. Let's look at number 6 also. Number 6. So here we have a standard absorption costing system. Following fixed product data is available for 1 month. Budgeted output, budgeted fixed production overhead, actual fixed production overhead 1,300,000, total fixed production overhead variance 100,000. So here we have a new term, not a new term, but we have learned it earlier, maybe in the earlier pillars, but it's called fixed production overhead variance. What is fixed production overhead variance when you say adverse? That means you have spent more than the budget 100,000. If it's favorable, that means you have spent less than the budget. So what we have to calculate is these are little uh, tricky calculations what we are going to learn how to do the calculation for this kind of a thing. So we have been asked to calculate the actual level of production. So we have to find out the actual level of production. So what we have is the budgeted output. We know the budgeted output is 200,000. Actual fixed production overheads are 1,300,000. Total fixed production overhead variance is 100,000. So now from these two you can get something. Actual is 1,300,000. The variance is 100. So what is your budgeted fixed production overheads, Asanaga? You incurred 1,300,000 and they say, hey, you have spent 100,000 extra. That is what the adverse variance means.
1.2 million.
1.2 million. That's correct. Yeah. So the budgeted overheads are 1.2 million. Correct. So remember your overhead absorption rate is always calculated based on budgeted production. So now we know the budgeted overheads are 1,200,000. The budgeted output is 200,000. Budgeted overheads are 1,200,000. The budgeted output is 200,000. So we can find out the overhead absorption rate is 6 per unit. Budgeted output is 200. The budgeted fixed overhead is 1,200,000. So the budgeted the overhead absorption rate is sorry, no, I missed it. Budgeted fixed production overheads are 1 million. Budgeted outputs are 200,000. So 1 million divided by 200,000 will give you the overhead absorption rate as 5. Right? That is the original predetermined one. Budgeted output is 200. Budgeted fixed production overhead is 1 million. So the overhead absorption rate is 5 per actual level of production. So now what we are trying to find out is the actual level of production. So total fixed production overhead is 1,300,000, and in arriving at 1,300,000, we know the what is allowed is 100,000 more. Total fixed production overhead variance is 100,000. So 1,200,000 is our overhead. Actual fixed production overhead was 1,300,000. What is budgeted for this figure is 1,200,000.
Yeah.
1,200,000 because we have spent 100,000. What is the overhead absorption rate? 5.
Right.
So 1,200,000 divided by 5 will give us our actual production.
Yeah.
1,200,000 divided by 5 will give our actual production. How did we do that one? We know actual fixed production overhead is 1,300,000. But what we are allowed is 1,200,000.
Oh.
1 and we know for 1,200,000 the overhead absorption rate is 5. So 1,200,000 divided by 5 should be our actual production. So 240 is the actual level of production. So you can see the tricky ones, little calculations. This area is a fairly calculation wise, it's a fairly complicated one. Your brains will have to work very smart in this area. Yeah. So now let's look at the next one also, question number 7. So here we have a company operate in a standard absorption costing system, absorb fixed production overhead based on machine hours. Earlier question we were going by the number of units. Here we are going by the machine hours. The budgeted fixed production overhead for the company for the year was 660. Budgeted output was 220 using 44,000 machine hours. Now, since they are said that they are going by the machine hours, even though the number of units are given, we must go by the machine hours. So 660 divided by 44,000 will give us the machine hour rate for overhead, which is 50. Because even though the number of units are given, we don't need to worry about the number of units. It is the 15, we must take it up as the overhead absorption rate. During the year, total fixed overhead debited to the fixed control account was 590,000. And the actual output was 200,000 or 38,000 machine hours. So 38,000 machine hours is the actual use at the rate of 15. What we will take is 15 into 38 is the amount that should go into the absorption. So 15 is the machine hour rate. Number of hours used is 38,000. 570,000 is the amount that we will absorb it into the production.
Yeah.
And they say during the year, the total fixed production cost was 590. So actual expenditure is another word 590. 590. But how much have we been absorbing? 570. 570. So what has happened? Is it over or under absorption? Spent 590. Spent 590.
Yeah.
Recovered or absorbed 570. So is it over or under?
Under.
Under. By how much?
20,000.
Under by 20,000, isn't it?
Yeah.
Under by 20,000. So under absorbed 20,000. That's the right answer.
Yeah.
because we have to remember, even though they are given the number of units, all that, we don't need to worry about that one, because the machine hour rate is, they say the budget was 660, and the 44,000 machine hours, so 15 is the overhead absorption rate. So we have done 38,000, so we will absorb 570, but our actual expenditure is 590, so 20 underabsorbed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where
Mhm.
this question confusing. A lot of extra information which we really don't need.
Yeah, right. That is the danger, because now sometimes you might, I know a lot of students work with the per unit cost, useless. Mm. Per unit absorption rate, and trying to get that one and to do all those things. It's a mulberry bush journey. You don't need all that.
Yeah,
So because we have was, and the actual output was 200,000 using 38,000 machine hours. We must go by the machine hours, because they say overhead based on machine hours. If they said overhead based on number of units, I will go by the number of units. So you have to read the question carefully, see what they are asking, and try to answer accordingly. Right. Okay. Let's look at the question number 8. So this is something that we learned yesterday. Company produces and sells one type of product. The details for the last year as follows: production, sales, no inventory at the start of the year, selling price, fixed production overhead, fixed selling cost. Calculate the actual profit for the year that would be reported using absorption costing. So you remember that we were looking the difference between absorption costing profit and the marginal costing profit. The difference arises mainly due to the inventory difference. Yesterday we learned something. The always the absorption costing profit will be more when the inventory increases between the opening and the closing. Right. So now look at the inventory. At the beginning, there's zero inventory. They did not have any inventory. They say the details as follows: production sales, there were no inventory at the start of the year. Actual inventory, the actual production 22, sales 20. Right? So they have an inventory level of 2000, opening 0, closing 2000. Right? Closing 2000. So that is the inventory level increase what we have between the two companies. So now we can see the overhead absorption rate. So how can we calculate the overhead absorption rate? So the budget is 130,000, fixed production overheads 130,000, and it was based on a 25,000 units of production. So we can find out the absorption rate. It is 130 divided by 25. So that's the first thing you must calculate. It is 5.2. So now what we know is the 5.2 is the overhead absorption rate. So inventory has increased by 2,000. So when the inventory increases by 2,000, your profit will, now that is what I want you to note down. Profit will increase by that number of inventory, 2,000, by the overhead absorption rate. So your absorption cost in profit will be 5.2 times 2,000, 10,400 more than the marginal costing. 10,400 more than marginal costing. Right? So now we can work out, because since they are not given us the total absorption rates and all that, we can work out what is the marginal cost profit. We know the actual sales are 20,000 units. Actual selling price is 70. Hmm. Actual selling price is 20, 70. Variable costs are 55. So 70 minus 55 is the contribution. Contribution is 15 per unit. And how many units they sell? 20,000. So 15 into 20,000, 300,000 is what we call the contribution. That is sales minus variable cost. And here in the marginal costing, the fixed production overheads are completely charged to the P&L. It is not charged to the inventory, it is charged complete to the P&L, 118,000. Fixed selling cost 75,000, completely charged to the P&L. So now you can see the profit and the marginal costing will be 107,000. 300,000 minus total fixed overheads minus total fixed selling price. So the marginal cost profit is 107,000. That we can easily arrive at. So in that case, what is the absorption cost and profit? It should be more by 10,400. So it is 107,000 marginal cost in profit plus 10,400, the inventory difference will be the absorption cost in profit. So this is a very, very famous examiner's question. He puts it up. He will give you one particular aspect of profit and will ask you the other marginal cost in all. So you have to just remember one thing here. Absorption cost in profit is always higher when the opening inventory or rather the closing inventory is more than the opening inventory. By that amount, the difference multiplied by the overhead absorption. So that is what first we did. We found the inventory. Inventory at the opening was 0, closing 2000. So the overhead absorption rate is 5.2. So we knew the profit should be more by 10,400. Then we worked out the marginal cost in profit. Marginal cost in profit was, we worked it out because we took the contribution minus total expenses. We found the marginal cost profit to be 107,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how you should be looking that kind of. So these are tricky questions. Again, you will be looking at some of these questions. You might have few problems. You have to tell me once you do. If you don't understand, just tell me. We will go back again.
Okay.
Yeah. Ninth question is the same as what we did earlier. The overhead absorption that earlier we did this same question. So that is when actual overhead exceeds the budgeted of overhead. So the same question has come up repeat. But let's look at the question number 10. A company produced 5,000 units of B product last month. Opening and closing inventory was 400 units and 900. So now you can see straight away. Opening has the closing units have gone up by 500.
Yeah.
Selling price production was as follows. Selling price, direct cost, variable production overhead. What is the gross profit using absorption costing? Give your answer to the nearest whole. So we know the units have gone up by 500. So that we know that part of it. So what is the gross profit for the product B last month? So what is given is the selling price, production cost, all that is given. So we can work out now here. Now here we can work out on another way. The total selling, the what we know is the company produced 500 units. So the opening units was 400. So here we have to find out the total sales now. So different things. So opening 400, then produce 5,000, 5,400, closing 900. That means they have sold 4,400, 500, right? 4,500 is what they sold. So simple, this one 4,500 into 20 is your total sales, 90,000. Direct cost, right? Direct cost, we know the opening inventory, what is the price? The what they say is the opening the opening inventory is 400 is the opening inventory we had,
Yeah.
and the closing inventory is 900, and the closing stock is 15,000. So we don't need to worry all that kind of a thing. What we can do is the direct cost is 6, what we know. So basically, what we are trying to look at is the gross profit. So the gross profit means sales minus cost of sales. Hmm?
Yeah.
Sales minus cost of sales. So the direct cost. So the direct cost is 6 into 4,500, right? 6 into 4,500, that is 27,000. Then the variable production overheads, 350 into 4,500. So that is also a straight away cost. 350 into 4,500, which is 15,750. Now we have to be careful with our fixed production overhead cost. So it is going to be 590. So that's also no problem for us. We know it is 590. So we produced and sold 4,500 units. 590. Hello. 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 Hello.
Hello, can you hear
Yeah,
me?
yeah. Now, yeah. There was some problem in my internet, but now it's all
Okay.
right. So, so 590 into 4,500 is your fixed overhead cost. Mhm. So, 590 into 4,500 is your fixed cost. So it's simple. 590 into 4,500. Take that one, and you can work out your overhead. So 26,550 is your overhead. So you have been asked to calculate the gross profit. It is 90,000 minus 27,000 minus 15,750 minus 26,550. So it will be 20,700. So this question you would have seen. What I want to explain in this question, you don't need to go by under absorption, over absorption, all that. You just took because you have to look at the question and see what is the easiest approach to using. They are given all the information, and you have been asked to calculate the absorption. So then you know the direct cost, you know the variable production overhead, we know the fixed production. You only have to find out with the figures the number of units that is sold. So the important thing in these questions, we will see the 10 questions, probably 10 different variations, different approaches to be used. So what I would like is I'll send you these questions. I like you to go to these questions again. I have the activity based costing questions. So don't try to attempt that one. It's just below this one. Don't try to attempt that one because I will do that one also with you before you attempt it. But do the first 10 questions what we just attempted and see how it is going to come out.
Yeah. If you go to last question,
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
uh, number 10,
Number 10. Yeah.
and you can see
Mhm.
they have given us the gross profit.
They
So
want to calculate, they are given as the gross profit per unit.
yes, so if we know the
Yeah,
units,
right.
for,
460 into 4,500 would have given you the straight away the calculation.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, right.
mm,
Right. 460 into 4,500 would have given you the calculation. Now
and it
you
will be a short.
it will be a shortcut. Now that what I'm trying to say is now that's very clever thinking. You have to look at all the information that is given is useless.
Yeah,
You only need the 460 and the production and the opening and the closing.
yeah,
So you can use different methods to arrive at the same answer. But you must try and use the shortest possible method to get the answer.
yeah,
So learning it's all right to do the hard way, but in the exam, try to look at the shortest possible way and do it.
yeah.
That's good. That's great. Yeah. Okay. Can we stick to this two times what we have? What's our convenience?
Yes.
Because this time is generally all right by me most of the days.
Mhm.
So can we make it next Saturday or Sunday same time,
Yes, please.
9 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will keep the same time and let's work it out on. So I will be probably looking because now I have done basically the activity based question, but you don't need to read. You can read the first two sections what you have done. I will be
Uh,
looking at the other costing techniques in the next lesson maybe.
yeah. Hope you are celebrating Christmas.
Yeah, yeah, definitely yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
And because I got holidays from 25th, 26th,
right. Yeah,
uh, 27th, and 28th. I got 4 days,
all
so
right.
I can, do some more studies
Okay,
on
sure,
these.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll see how it is going to be. Because our programs are very much dependent on my daughter's situation here.
Yeah, understand.
Yeah, every time we never know what the situation here. Christmas, wedding, home, everything is dependent on her situation. So
Yeah.
we just keep on going on a hourly basis, like so it should be all right. Yeah. So we'll see how it is when it comes for the period. 25th definitely we are out, but 26th, 27th definitely we are in, and we'll try to work it out.
Okay then.
Okay, then I'll see you on 26th.
Yeah.
Okay,
Wish you Merry Christmas.
thank you. Same to you. Right. Okay. Thanks, Asanka. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.